Golden Radio Hour.
Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. And I want to ask you something. You know, every now and then I've told you about the good old American custom of serving a glass of sherry before dinner, particularly Petri California sherry. And I wonder if you've tried that Petri sherry. Really, a glass of Petri sherry is the best beginning a good meal ever had. Petri sherry is clear, fragrant, and truly delicious. It's a wonderful wine whose flavor is the essence of luscious, sun-ripened grapes. And Petri makes two kinds of sherry wine, a regular sherry and Petri Pale Dry. If you don't know which you prefer, try them both. Don't buy one, buy two. But remember, always buy Petri, because Petri wine is always good wine. Well, I'm sure Dr. Watson's ready for us. Let's go in and join him, shall we?
Come in. Good evening, Mr. Bartell.
Good evening, Doctor.
Quiet, Willie. Quiet about here. Lie down.
The dogs seem very pleased with themselves tonight. Did they have a good day?
Yes, the three of us did, my boy. Go on. Run off out in the patio. I took a 7-iron and some old golf balls on the beach this afternoon. I improved my game, I think, and the dogs had a great time chasing the golf balls. On the way home, the little rascals had a furious battle with an elderly pelican, so their day was complete.
I'll have to join you on one of your afternoon strolls, Doctor. You and the dog seem to have so much fun.
Oh, I'll be glad of your company, Mr. Bartell. Well, draw up your usual chair, and I'll get on with tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure.
From the hints you gave us last week, I guess a Frenchman played a prominent part in the story?
Yes, indeed he did, Mr. Bartell. His name was Francois Lavillard, and he was a detective of some note in his own country. The time my story begins, it was in 1889, to be exact. Lavillard had come over to London to discuss with Holmes the difficulties of translating some of his monographs into the French language. At this particular time, I was in the early days of my marriage, Mr. Bartell, and this fact, combined with a busy practice, meant that I saw very little of my old friend.
He must have missed you, Doctor.
Oh, he did. Well, of course, he'd never admit the fact, but to get on with my story. One cloudless June afternoon, I found myself in the neighborhood of Baker Street, and I couldn't resist paying a visit to Holmes. Mrs. Hudson was out, but having retained my old latchkey, I let myself in and mounted the familiar stairs. It gave me a strange feeling as I raised my hand to knock on what once had been my own living room door.
Come in.
Oh, hello, Holmes.
Monsieur Holmes.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I didn't know you...
Watson, my dear fellow. How very nice to see you again.
It's great to see you, Holmes. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No.
I didn't know that you had company.
Not at all, my dear fellow. We're delighted, aren't we, Lavillard? Watson,
oui.
this is Monsieur Lavillard.
How do you do, sir? How do you do?
Enchanté, monsieur. I have often wished to meet the so charming Dr. Watson. Holmes has told me a great deal about you.
Oh, it's very nice of you, sir.
That age suits you, Watson. You look splendid, old fellow. Gained a little weight, haven't you?
Yes, a few pounds, I
It
believe.
becomes you. Sit down, won't you?
You sure that I'm not interrupting you in some important discussion?
Oh, no.
Oh, no, mon cher docteur. We were having a good-natured argument on the relative abilities of the French criminal compared to the English.
Oh, interesting.
You must lend me your
Interesting
support,
idea.
Watson. Monsieur Lavillard is convinced that the English criminal is a very dull dog indeed.
Well, we've met some far from dull ones in our time. I assure you, Monsieur Lavillard.
The exceptions rather than the rule, I fear, mon cher docteur.
You're stubborn, aren't you, Lavillard?
Believe me, my dear friend, that I will yield to no one in my admiration of your knowledge and skill. That is why I wish I could persuade you to practice in Paris. There you would find opponents really worthy of your steel. What can happen to interest you in this land of gray fogs, boiled potatoes, and pots of tea?
Gracious me for myself, sir, you're not very flattering.
Oh, don't be so insular, Watson.
Oh, I meant no offense, my friend.
Well, you say that the English criminal is dull. Well, perhaps if you were to read a published story of mine called A Study in Scarlet, you'd think differently. It tells of a very exciting adventure that Holmes and I had.
I have read it, my friend.
Oh, you have?
An extremely gripping story, but surely you will admit that the crime was essentially of American origin.
He's right, Watson. He's perfectly right, dear me. What can I do to vindicate the dishonor of the London criminal? Let me see. Oh, yes, of course. A copy of today's Times. That's fine. I shall introduce you to a section known as the agony column. Where is it now? Oh, yes, here we are. This should convince you of the color and variety of English life.
The agony column?
Mm-hmm.
It sounds most painful. What is it, pray?
A personal column is liable to contain anything from a lover's frantic appeal to his lady love to a ransom note.
In my profession, I've frequently found it an invaluable medium for contacting the underworld. Yes, now, here we are. Here's something. Dear me. Oh, dear, no. Today's column seems rather uninspired, I'm afraid.
May I examine it?
Of course, here you are.
Merci. If the lady who helped my little boy across the road at the corner of Threadwell Street and High Auburn last Wednesday at 4 will get in touch with Box 845, she will learn of something to her advantage. We can be more colorful than that in Paris, my friend.
Yes, I think we can do better than that, too. Yeah, look at this, will you?
The printer must have been half asleep when he set up the type for this advertisement. Will any gentleman interested in discussing cryptography and cipher writing please communicate with Box XQL 696, The Time?
Oh, I fail to find this message any more stirring than the preceding one.
You notice the execrable printing, don't you?
Indeed I do. It is all mixed up. The first word, will, starts with a capital W and a capital I. The second word, any, starts with a small a, and then has a capital N and Y. It is a shocking example of typography.
And when it occurs in a paper noted for its excellence in typesetting, one realizes that this is no mistake.
What do you mean, huh?
This is undoubtedly a code message.
Come now, my friend. I defy even you to make a mystery out of a printer's negligence.
I accept your challenge, my dear Levian. If you recall, the Baconian bilateral cipher depends upon the use of two sizes of type. If we group the letters in units of 5, the arrangements of small and capital letters within the group should give us the message. Now, let's see. 2 capitals followed by 3 small gives us the letter H. Then 2 capitals, 1 small, 2 more. That gives us E, H.
I still think you're trying to make an adventure out of a mere printing accident.
No mere printing accident could so readily fall into one of the great traditional ciphers. Now, let's see. This message reads H-E-L, help, Q, too small, Q-U-I, quilter, help, quilter, L, too small and large, elms, help, quilter, elms, there it is, yes, penge, help, quilter, elms, penge.
Help, quilter, elms, penge. What does that mean?
Presumably that a man named Quilter, who lives at a house called the Elms, in the village of Penge, needs help.
I see it now. A helpless victim held prisoner. He smuggles out this message as a harmless personnel, with strict instructions that it be printed on this art form. He knows that the amateurs of cryptography, to whom it is addressed, will decipher this call for help. Et voilà.
Monsieur Villa, you seem ready to grant that adventure can exist in London, after all.
The advantage, my dear Watson, of a more mercurial temperament than we Englishmen possess. Well, Levian, what about it? Shall we set off for Penge and rescue the ingenious Mr. Quilter from whatever dire fate awaits him in the elms?
I'm all impatience.
Splendid. Watson, I suppose you're too busy to join us.
Too busy?
Well, I'm in your practice. I'm sure that you have patience to attend to.
Yes, of course. Yes. As a matter of fact, I have 2 further visits to make today. One to a peppery old miser who has gout, and the other to a wealthy society woman who has acute attack of hypochondria, as they call it. The 2 places with a hell with both. I'm coming with you, Holmes, if you want me.
Bravo, Watson. Then grab your hat and coat. The game's afoot.
Here you are, gents. The Helms Penge. Nice afternoon for a drive, wasn't it? Afraid it'll cost you 15 bob, though.
There's a sovereign for you. You can keep the change.
Blimey, thank you, Governor. Top of the evening to you, gents.
So this is the Elms, eh? Quite a bit of land for such a modest neighborhood.
To call it the Elms seemed remarkably inapropos. I cannot see an elm tree in sight.
So you see, Livia, the English have more imagination than you give them credit for.
Are you just going to walk up to the front door and knock, Holmes?
Why not? The direct approach is often the most satisfactory.
Oh, you disappoint me. I had hoped that perhaps you would adopt one of the disguises in which you are so adept, I am told.
Well, since it's unlikely that these people know me by sight, that's hardly necessary, is it? However, I trust that this little problem may reward you with some colorful highlights before we're through. Oh.
Great Scott. Revolver shots. They came from the house.
We are too late. Monsieur Quilter has been murdered.
No, I think not. You will observe that the next-door neighbor to the Elms was mowing his front lawn as we drove up. He is still engaged in the same occupation. Obviously, revolver shots attract little attention in this vicinity.
Mon Dieu, you mean that violence and sudden death are so common that they do not attract even the passing interest?
No, Villa. Even the British are not as phlegmatic as that.
Then what is the answer to those shots, Holmes?
Look, some member of this household is addicted to pistol practice. The fact that a shooting target is nailed to the back of that fence over there would further support the theory.
Well, that's rather ominous, in my opinion.
Well, here we are at the front door. Let's keep our wits about us anyway.
Are you carrying a revolver, Dr. Watson?
No, and a stethoscope, I'm afraid. I was prepared for sickness when I left the house today, and not for crime.
I, too, am unarmed. How about you, Monsieur Holmes?
Only a magnifying glass, I'm afraid. Hardly a very lethal weapon.
Yes?
My friends and I were calling on Mr. Quilter.
Oh? Who are you?
My name is Sherlock Holmes, and these are my friends, Dr. Watson and Monsieur Leviat.
How do you do, madam? How do you do?
Is Mr. Quilter expecting
I
you?
don't know. We read his advertisement in the agony column of the Times today and came down here at once. Are you a relation of his?
I'm his niece.
Oh.
My name is Doris Faversham. Come in, won't you?
Miss Faversham, I suppose it is.
Yes, Doctor. It's Miss Faversham.
We heard 3 revolver shots as we were walking up the driveway. They gave us quite a start.
Yes, mademoiselle. We were afraid that we might have arrived at the time of tragedy.
Yes, indeed.
Tragedy? Oh, my hobby is revolver shooting. I was doing some target practice in the back garden as you arrived.
Revolver shooting, Miss Faversham. How very interesting. I flatter myself that I'm something of a marksman myself.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, perhaps we can have a match. Won't you sit down?
Your challenge intrigues me, Miss Faversham, but before I accept it, I should like to see Mr. Quilter.
Well, Uncle George is paralyzed, you know.
Oh,
Spends all his time in a wheelchair. I'm not at all sure he'll see you.
Well, at least you can ask him, can't you, Miss Faversham?
It is his custom at this time of the day to take a little nap. Perhaps tomorrow...
Doris!
He's still awake.
Who's it?
Yes, Uncle. Some men have come to see you, Uncle.
Well, bring him in.
Follow me, gentlemen. Uncle, this is Mr. Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, and Monsieur
Le Villard.
and Monsieur Leviat.
How do you
How
do,
do you do, sir? How do you do?
Sherlock Holmes, eh? Took you long enough to decipher my message and get here, didn't it? Your brother's a much faster worker, isn't he?
Oh, what makes you say that, Mr. Quilter?
Received this telegram from him at 11 o'clock this morning. Read it for yourself.
Oh, well, what's it say, Holmes?
Suggest you consult my brother Sherlock, and it's signed Mycroft Holmes. Yes, Mr. Quilter, my brother is a much faster worker. Or shall we say that he suffers from the unfortunate habit of early rising. He undoubtedly read the agony column 3 hours before I did today.
Don't know about that, but I've been expecting you all day. I imagine you know why I inserted that advertisement.
Well, I had the impression that you were under some form of restraint, that you were in need of a rescue party, as it were.
Rubbish. My advertisement was a piece of subtle bait. The only person that could decipher the message would obviously be someone who knew the Baconian cipher.
Very logical deduction, Mr. Quilter.
You see, I'm convinced, as any sensible man should be, that the so-called Shakespearean plays were written by Sir Francis Bacon.
Oh, I see.
But I felt that it needed a clever man to prove the fact.
Mm-hmm.
I was sure that anyone who was able to decipher my message was the man I needed. And what will it take, Mr. Holmes, to do the job? I'm a rich man. Name your fee.
You mean to say that you inveigled Mr. Holmes down here just to do some research on the origin of Shakespeare's work?
Oh, you needn't look so shocked, Dr. Watson. My uncle has offered to pay him a handsome fee.
Well, what do you say, Mr. Sherlock Holmes?
An interesting subject for research. I'll concede that Ignatius Donnelly and others have proved almost beyond doubt that William Shakespeare of Stratford-on-Avon did not write the plays, but I greatly doubt that Lord Bacon did. I may devote my leisure and later years to some investigation on the subject, but in the meanwhile, Mr. Quilter, I'm afraid I'm much too busy to undertake such an assignment.
Please yourself. Show the gentleman out, Doris.
Goodbye, sir.
Good day, sir.
Too bed. You had this long drive down here for nothing,
Yes,
gentlemen.
I'm afraid I quite agree.
It would seem to me that your uncle has a distinct talent for practical joking, mademoiselle.
Uncle? Oh, Uncle never made a joke in his life. Mr. Holmes, now that you're here, perhaps you'd like to indulge in a little shooting match.
Thank you, Miss Faversham, but as I told your uncle, I'm a busy man. Good evening to you.
Goodbye, gentlemen.
Goodbye.
Holmes, old fellow, you're losing your touch. You'd never have made a blunder like this if I'd still been with you.
It is comforting for an aspiring detective like myself to know that the great Sherlock Holmes is fallible.
Yes, indeed.
Then am I to assume that I must continue the case alone?
What do you mean, continue the case? There isn't one. Quilter's in no danger.
He's in desperate danger.
What?
I'm only afraid I may be too late to save him.
But we have just spoken to the man.
Oh, no. Did neither of you notice the traces of fresh loam on the boots of that supposedly paralyzed man? Gentlemen, I fear the agony column has led us to murder.
You'll hear the rest of Dr. Watson's story in just a second. Time enough for me to mention that any meal is a better meal when it's served with a Petri dinner wine. If you're having chicken or fish, use Petri California Sauterne. Petri Sauterne is a subtle, delicately flavored white wine that looks and tastes like captured sunshine. If you're having a roast or chops or any kind of meat or meat dish, then by all means serve Petri California Burgundy. Petri Burgundy is a hearty, full-flavored red wine. One of the most delicious red wines you ever poured from a bottle. Why not get a bottle of each? Petri Burgundy and Petri Sauterne. Then, no matter what you have for dinner, you'll surely have the right wine, a Petri wine. Well, Doctor, why did you have to break off your story there?
Well, I had to break it off somewhere, Mr. Bartell, and that seemed to be the most exciting spot.
It certainly was. I was convinced that the great Sherlock Holmes had been fooled for once. What happened next?
Well, my boy, needless to remark, we did not get into a cab and go back to London, but let me pick up the story at the same place that I broke it off. As Holmes said...
Gentlemen, I fear the agony column has led us to murder.
Murder?
There was fresh earth on the soles of his boots, you say?
Distinct traces, proving that the man in the wheelchair was not paralyzed.
And that man, whoever he is, was impersonating Quilter to put us off the track.
And the real Quilter may have been killed, eh?
I'm afraid so. Let's stop here for a moment, shall we, while we make our plans. This hedge will hide us from the house in case they're watching from the windows. Now, this isn't a hard picture to reconstruct. There undoubtedly is, or was, a paralyzed Baconian scholar named Quilter. He managed to smuggle out that ingenious plea for help, but Mycroft's unfortunate telegram gave the game away.
Mm-hmm. I see it now. The people in there, holding him prisoner, forced him to reveal what he has done, eh?
What they may have done to him, heaven alone knows.
One of the criminals, guessing from the telegram that I might appear on the case, posed as the crippled Quilter.
What's our next move, Holmes?
Remember that singularly unattractive young lady skilled with a revolver? We must search the grounds as unobtrusively as we can.
Search the grounds? For what?
I can answer that question, Monsieur Docteur. We search for signs of the freshly turned earth of a grave.
We didn't find any traces of the poor devil's corpse, thank heaven.
No. A great disappointment.
Oh, dear me, you're very bloodthirsty, Livia. Hello. Look at the old fellow trimming the hedge over there.
Must be the gardener.
Let's have a chat with him, shall we? May be able to give us some information. Good evening to you.
Evening to you, gentlemen.
Really?
You work for Mr. Quilter?
That I do, sir. That I do.
Very fine work, too. I've seldom seen a better-kept garden.
I thank you, sir. I do pride myself in my work.
I wonder if you can help me.
Be glad to if I can, sir.
Did you see a telegraph boy deliver a message here this morning?
That I did, sir. The boy came here about 10 o'clock this morning. I was a clipping the front edge at the time.
And you've been working here ever since?
Yes, sir. Brought my lunch with me today and ate it in the garden.
Has anyone entered or left the house since that telegram was delivered?
No, sir. No one except yourselves.
I see. I suppose you occasionally run errands for Mr. Quilter?
Not much these days, sir. The poor old gentleman keeps his chair in the house pretty much all the time, sir. I did run a message for him yesterday, though.
Oh, you did? Where to?
Well, sir, I was pruning the rose bushes under his study windows when the window opens and his hand comes out with a message. He told me to take it to the village office of the Times and to tell him to print it just the way it was. He looked kind of worried when he gave me the message, and he He whispered to me, just as if he was afraid in his own house.
I'm much obliged to you. Here's 5 shillings for your trouble.
Oh, thank you, sir. Much obliged to you, I'm sure.
Good evening.
Good evening to you, gentlemen.
Oh, so that's how the message was smuggled out.
And no one has come to the house or left it since that telegram was delivered.
Therefore, Coulter or his body must still be inside that house.
We are going to search the house?
Yes, we are.
But we're not armed, and they certainly are. They probably won't even let us in.
Yes, they will. We have an infallible key to entry, a woman's vanity. Come on.
Oh, so you came back. I thought you wouldn't be able to resist my challenge to a pistol match, Mr. Holmes.
Exactly, Miss Faversham. We had difficulty in finding a cab and decided to take a train back to London. There was an hour's wait, so I thought I'd accept your challenge.
Good. Come in. We'll go into the back garden.
Thank you.
Don't talk loudly. I think Uncle's asleep in the next room.
Don't bring anybody in here, Doris. I want to sleep.
All right, Uncle. This way, gentlemen.
If your uncle wants to sleep, seems a funny sort of alibi.
Oh, well, he's used to that, Doctor. Here we are. This is the 50-yard range, Mr. Holmes. 3 shots. Best aggregate score wins. How much do you want to bet?
You name the stake. Name the stakes, Miss Faversham.
A sovereign?
Certainly. You take the first 3 shots?
Very well. I must just check that it's loaded. Yes, 6 bullets. All right, here I go.
Bravo, Miss Faversham. Splendid.
Bullseye and 2 winners. I can do better. Your turn, Mr. Holmes.
Doris, who are these men?
Friends of mine. I'll introduce you in a minute, Geoffrey. We're in the middle of a match at the moment. Your turn, Mr. Holmes.
The revolver, please.
Here you are.
Thank you.
You're sure you know how to handle a revolver?
Oh, quite sure, thanks.
Then why are you pointing it at me?
Because I want you to raise your hands above your head. You too, whatever your name is.
Doris, who are these men?
Put up your hands. I shan't hesitate to shoot, I assure you. Come on. That's it.
What in heaven's name do you think you're up to?
Finding out what became of the real Mr. Quilter. Search the man, Watson.
Right you are, Holmes.
VR, go into the house, will you, and search it.
Yes, but of course.
Hello, this man had a revolver on his hip.
Keep him covered with it.
Here, stand still, you.
Now, sir, who are you? From your resemblance to the man in the wheelchair that we saw earlier, I should say that you're a member of the same family.
We're both relatives of Mr. Quilter.
That's right. My name's Davies. I'm from the Australian branch of the family.
Relatives, yes. And doubtless you stood to inherit his estate in the event of Quilter's death. You moved in on this defenseless old man, terrorized him, lived off him, and finally found it necessary to destroy him.
You're talking absolute rubbish.
You're telling the truth and you know it. I can tell by your expressions.
Move back into the house, both of you. Come on. And keep your hands raised. All right, that's it. Come on. Lead the way into the study. The man posing as Mr. Quilter is still there. We heard him call out as we came in.
Yes, we might as well confront the 3 of them together. Yes, he's still seated in the chair. He seems to be asleep.
Leah! Did you find anything?
Not a trace of the missing men, Monsieur Holmes.
Davis, what did you do with Mr. Quilter?
I didn't do anything with him.
Of course not. He's sitting there in that chair.
It's no good lying to us. We know that man's an imposter.
This is a fantastic situation. Nobody has left this house since the telegram arrived, and nobody has come to it, yet Mr. Quilter has vanished.
Good Lord, how can he sleep through all this talk? You'd think he'd been drugged.
Sophia! We're idiots. You are unquestionably the most promising detective in France, and some people have been kind enough to grant me a similar status in England, and yet my old friend Watson has just solved the case.
Oh, well, it was nothing. It was just too happy to... What? Solved it? Well, how?
Listen to the breathing of that man in the chair.
What?
He's been drugged. There sits the real Mr. Quilter, the persecuted victim who sent a cipher message for help.
The man we spoke to earlier.
Was you, Mr. Davies, impersonating Quilter. After you'd received us, you took off your disguise, adopted an Australian accent, and then hid your drug victim by placing him in his own wheelchair, knowing that would be the last place we'd look for him.
And they would have kept him here until we had gone and then murdered him.
What a devilish plot.
Well, What have you got to say for yourselves?
It was Geoffrey's idea, not mine. I didn't have anything to do with it.
That's a dirty lie. You were in this as much as I am.
Oh, this is splendid, simply splendid. Please continue the argument. It'll make interesting evidence in court.
You can't take us into court.
Of course you can't. What's the charge? Quilter's still alive, isn't he?
When Mr. Quilter revives under Dr. Watson's ministrations, you will be charged, I have no doubt, with attempted murder, abduction, sequestration, duress, and probably several other counts. Monsieur Villard, if you will find us a cab, we'll take these miscreants to Scotland Yard. Our work is done.
Well, Doctor, that was a fine story. What are you fidgeting for?
Fidgeting me? Well, I'm expecting a guest. I thought I heard him just now, the front door.
A guest? Now, you're being as mysterious as Mr. Holmes.
Oh, not quite. You see, come in.
Dr. Watson, how are you old rascal?
Gregory, my boy, it's great to see you again. Mr. Bartell, meet my friend, Mr. Gregory Hood.
Not the Gregory Hood.
Mr. Bartell, I like the way you say that.
Yes, Mr. Bartell, this is the Gregory Hood.
Mr. Bartell, if you listen to Dr. Watson, he'll lead you to believe I'm much more important than I am. I'm quite a simple person, really. I'm kind to dogs, just love little children, and always help old ladies cross the street. I also know how to make a fire by rubbing two sticks together.
Yes, and unlike my old friend Holmes, you pretend to know very little about criminals and crime, and yet you're one of America's outstanding criminologists.
So I've heard.
A hobby, Mr. Bartell, a hobby. My real business is importing, headquarters San Francisco. Need any old masters? Perhaps I can sell you a nice piece of jade, or would you rather have a bit of old Balinese sculpture?
No, wait a minute. This is all a little too fast for me.
Yes, you learn that Gregory is a little too fast for everybody. But, Mr. Bartell, I'm sure you'll get to know Mr. Hood a good deal better. You see, as I've told you, I've always wanted to take a trip back to England, and now I have a chance to do so.
But, Doctor, won't I see you again? What about our story?
Oh, I shall be back in the fall, but meanwhile, I've asked Mr. Gregory Hood to get together with you at this time every week and tell you some of his experiences.
Which, of course, makes me feel very important.
Mr. Hood, as you know, has been involved in many famous cases dealing in crime. His importing business and his hobby criminology are a strange combination. I learned that he keeps a diary of these cases, and it's a fascinating book. The Case Book of Gregory Hood.
The Case Book of Gregory Hood. Sounds intriguing.
Intriguing? It certainly is.
Thank you.
Well, then I can tell all our friends, be sure to listen next week at the same time and every Monday night through the summer to The Case Book of Gregory Hood. Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and was suggested by an incident in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's story, The Sign of Four. Music is by Dean Fossler. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is Harry Bartell saying goodnight for the Petri family. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us another exciting story about his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. As for me, instead of telling you something, I'd like to ask you something. Do you like chicken? How do you like it best? Roasted, fried, or in a stew with dumplings? Well, whatever your favorite may be, you'll like that chicken infinitely better when it's served with a glass of Petri California Sauterne. Now there's a combination. Chicken and Petri Sauterne. Petri Sauterne is a white wine, pale golden in color, delicately fragrant, and clear as crystal. And what a flavor that Petri Sauterne has. I'm telling you, Petri Sauterne is just about the last word in dinner wine. Oh, one more tip. Remember to serve Petri Sauterne with fish or any kind of seafood. Good, it's great. To be sure you have a glass of good wine, be sure it's Petri wine. And now I'm sure our good friend Dr. Watson's expecting us. Let's go in and join him. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Mr. Bartell. Punctual to the minute, as usual. Draw up a chair and settle down, my boy.
Well, I won't settle down too far, Doctor. You have a habit of keeping me on the edge of my chair during most of your stories.
Just as it should be, Mr. Bartell. I hope tonight will prove no exception, so light up your pipe and I'll get on with my story.
Doctor, from the hint you gave us last week, it sounded like quite a thriller. How did it begin?
On a cold winter morning in 1897, Holmes and I, our breakfast just concluded, sat on either side of a cheery fire in our Baker Street lodging. A thick fog rolled down between the line of dun-colored houses, and the opposite windows loomed like dark, shapeless blurs through the heavy yellow reef.
Another London pea souper, huh, Doctor?
Exactly, Mr. Bartell. Our gas was lit and shone its flickering light on the white cloth and glimmer of china, for the breakfast table had not been cleared. Holmes was busy indexing his record of crime, while I was engrossed in one of Clark Russell's fine sea stories. Our morning was not destined, however, to be a quiet one. For shortly after 11 o'clock, Mrs. Hudson ushered a young lady into our room. A young lady who seemed to be in serious trouble. Sit down, won't you, young lady? I'm Dr. Watson, and this is Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
How do you do, gentlemen? I must apologize for not giving my name to your housekeeper, but I have to be so careful.
Yes, we quite understand, my dear.
Of course, you're wondering who I am and what's brought me here.
My own theory would be that you are Miss Harriet Irving, and that you've come to me to elicit my aid in proving that Mr. Binion did not murder your father.
Holmes, what on earth are you talking about?
You're absolutely correct, Mr. Holmes. But
What?
how did you know?
I deduced it, Miss Irving. You're wearing very new and extremely expensive mourning, presumably for the first time, since a few basting threads are still in evidence. You wear no ring, so evidently you're not in mourning for a husband. The only man whose death the papers announced in the past few days and who left a young daughter wealthy enough to purchase such garments is Sir Edward Irving. And since the police have already made an arrest, obviously you wish me to disprove the police theory and intercede for young Binion.
Mr. Holmes, you're wonderful. That's just what I wanted to do. You will, won't you?
Miss Irving, I've studied the newspaper reports very carefully. It would seem to me that Scotland Yard has arrested the right man.
Well, I'm very sorry, but I didn't read the newspaper reports. I haven't the faintest idea what you're both talking about.
Then let me bring you up to date, my dear fellow. And please correct me, Miss Irving, if I make any mistakes. 3 days ago, Sir Edward Irving, the father of this young lady, was found stabbed to death in his study.
Gracious me, I'm sorry to hear that.
The only entrance to the study is through an anteroom, where his secretary had been sitting ever since Sir Edward was last seen alive. And the secretary swore that no one had entered or left the study.
Secretary's name being Binion, I suppose.
Yes, under the circumstances, it's hard to see that any other arrest was possible.
And yet I know he's innocent, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, and how do you know that, Miss Irving?
We were in love. We were going to be married. I don't care what the police say. A woman knows these things. Robert Binion did not kill my father.
Did your father approve of the engagement?
Well, no, not exactly.
If one were to be exact, Miss Irving, wouldn't one say that your father absolutely forbade the marriage?
Yes, he did.
And Inspector Lestrade assumed that was the motive for the murder.
Well, sounds logical, I must say.
Does your father have any other relatives living, Miss Irving?
His brother, my Uncle Peregrine, he lives a hermit's life in the country. We've seen very little of him in the last few years.
Was he left anything under your father's will?
No, I was the sole beneficiary. Please help me, Mr. Holmes. If you'll just talk to Robert, you'll know he's not guilty.
Oh, there's no harm in talking to him, Holmes. After all, our old friend Lestrade handled the case, and he's made a good many mistakes in the past.
Oh, haven't we all, old chap? Well, Miss Irving, I'll do what I can, but I promise nothing.
Bless you, Mr. Holmes.
Where is your fiancé being held?
At Scotland Yard. I talked to him there just before I came to
Scotland Yard, eh? Splendid. We can talk to Lestrade at the same time. Watson, your hat...
My hat and coat?
Precisely, old fellow, your hat and coat.
So, Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson think they know more than the Yard, eh? Come over here to teach us our business, I suppose.
Nothing of the sort, Lestrade. We came over here to make a few inquiries.
I'll tell you, gentlemen, that you're wasting your time. Young Binion is guilty, whatever his young lady may say.
Lestrade,
Yes, Mr. Holmes?
what did the autopsy prove?
Well, got a report of it here on my desk, but it won't tell you nothing you don't know.
Mm-hmm. Death was instantaneous, caused by some weapon like a long needle, a fine stiletto, or an ice pick, penetrating the brain at the base of the skull.
And no such weapon was found in the room.
Or on Mr. Binion.
True, sir. But then he had the chance of disposing of it.
Well, just the same, the murder weapon hasn't been found, has it?
No, Doctor, but we'll find it. Don't you worry about that.
I should like to talk to the prisoner, if you don't mind.
Well, of course I don't mind. He's in the detention cell just down the corridors from here. Follow me, gentlemen.
Has he given you any trouble, Lestrade?
Trouble? If all our prisoners were as quiet as him, we wouldn't need no guards, Doctor. Nice, quiet young fellow. Hard to realize he's a murderer.
A fact that still has to be proven in court, Lestrade.
A fact that is going to be proved in court, Mr. Holmes. Well, here we are at this cell. You've got visitors, Binion. Very distinguished visitors.
Who are you, gentlemen?
My name is Holmes, Sherlock Holmes, and this is my colleague, Dr. Watson.
I'm sorry to see you in this plight, Mr. Binion.
Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Then Harriet did come and see you when she left you. I'm so glad. You'll get me out of this mess. I know you will.
Even Mr. Sherlock Holmes can't get you out of this one, young fellow, my
Mr.
lad.
Binion, I promised your fiancée that I'd try and help you. My obvious course is to go to Sir Edward's house and examine the room in which the tragedy occurred. But before I do that, I'd like to ask you a question or two.
Ask me any question you want to, sir.
It was you who discovered the body, I understand.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
Please describe the circumstances.
Sir Edward was in his study. I'd been working in the anteroom adjoining. At 5 o'clock, I went in to say good night to him, and I found him slumped in his chair, dead, with blood streaming down the back of his head. Of course, I sent the butler for the police at once.
Could anyone have entered that room without your knowledge?
No, Mr. Holmes, I never left my desk. And there was no other entrance to the room save through my office.
How about the windows in Edward's room?
They were locked from the inside, Doctor.
You don't need to worry. We examined the window ledges, not a mark. No one came in that way.
What is your theory of the murder, Mr. Binion?
I haven't one, Mr. Holmes. I'm completely baffled. I'm certain that no one entered that room. Yet I swear to you that I didn't stab him. So I can understand the police believing I did.
Mm-hmm. Lestrade, I should like to examine the room in which Sir Edward was murdered.
Well, easiest thing in the world, Mr. Holmes. I'll drive over with you if you like. His house is in Knightsbridge.
Oh, you needn't bother, Lestrade. We can quite well go by ourselves. Eh?
Oh, not a bit of it, Doctor. I'd like to come with you.
Oh, why, Lestrade? You're convinced Mr. Binion is guilty, are you? Won't you be wasting your time?
Not me. For once I know you're on the wrong side of a case, Mr. Holmes, and I want to be there and see your faces when you find it out. This is the house, Mr. Holmes.
Yes, it's an imposing-looking place, I must say. I imagine, Lestrade, that you still have a police guard inside.
Oh, yes, Doctor. There's been a sergeant guarding the dead man's room day and night. We still haven't found the missing weapon, you know.
Yes, gentlemen.
I'm Inspector Lestrade of Scotland Yard. We wish to examine the house.
I must see your identification, sir.
What are you talking about? I've been in and out of this house half a dozen times.
I have my orders, sir.
Oh, very well.
Is Miss Irvin at home?
Miss Irvin is not receiving, sir.
Great Scott, man, can't you give us any information?
There's been tragedy in this house, sir, and the truth of it's not known yet. I'm not answering any questions that I don't have to.
There now. Does this police guard satisfy you?
Inspector Lestrade. Very good, Inspector. You may come in. May I direct you, gentlemen?
No, thank you. I know this house nearly as well as you do.
I think not, Inspector. I've served here for 27 years. Now, gentlemen, if you're not needing me, I'll return to my quarters.
Bless my soul. That's a sinister-looking chap if I ever saw one.
Yes, and he knows something. You see, Lestrade, there is a possibility that Binion is innocent.
Yes, I began to see that, sir, when you were talking to the butler.
You're being very cryptic. What other possibility are you talking about?
The possibility that Binion, the arrested man, is shielding the real murderer. And whom would he be most certain to shield?
You mean his fiancée, Miss Irvin?
That's right, old fellow.
What?
Here we are. This is the anteroom where young Binion worked. And that door there leads into the study where Sir Edward was found.
Nothing been touched, of course, since the discovery of the crime?
Oh, no, Mr. Holmes. That's why we've had a constable on duty in there night and day. Before the trial, we're bringing experts in to test the room for secret panels or anything of that kind.
Let's examine the dead man's room, shall we?
Right you are, Mr. Holmes. Webster. Webster, get out of that chair and stand up, can't you? You're on duty.
Asleep. Carty. He's dead.
Yes. The trickle of blood oozing out from the base of his skull.
Well, strike me pink. He's being killed the same way as Sir Edward was.
I presume you'll agree that Mr. Binion didn't commit this murder, Lestrade?
Well, of course not, Mr. Holmes. He couldn't have done it. He's locked up at the yard. Well, what are we going to do?
Ask the butler to come here, will you?
Oh, well, right you are, sir. What do you make of their wound, Doctor?
Well, to fit the description of the one that killed Sir Edward. There's a fine puncture here at the base of the skull. Had you, Holmes? They mentioned a stiletto on ice pick. A wound like this might be caused by one of those long steel hat pins that women wear.
Yes, it's a possibility, Watson, a distinct possibility. And Miss Irvin was wearing a long hat pin this morning, if you remember. Plastered walls. A little chance of secret panels here, I should say.
And the window locked from the inside, eh?
Yeah. Here he is, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, yes. And by the way, what's your name?
Travers, sir.
You see what's happened, Travers?
Yes, sir, I see. The constable's been killed just like my master.
Now, tell me, Travers, is this room exactly as it was in Sir Edward's lifetime?
Yes, sir. Except that my master was not in the habit of keeping the corpses of policemen in here.
Here, don't try to be funny, Travers. Don't you realize you're mixed up in a murder case?
I meant no offense, gentlemen.
Marks in their bad taste, my good fellow.
The point of my question, Travers, was to find out if any of the furniture in here had been moved lately.
Not moved, sir. But there has been a piece of furniture added. That armchair the dead man's lying in.
The same chair in which Sir Edward's body was found. Of course, that's the answer. Travers, when was that chair delivered? And who delivered it?
It was delivered the day before Sir Edward died. It came from Silver Schwartz's antique shop in Bond Street, sir.
That game's afoot, Lestrade. See to the removal of this poor man's body. Seal the room, and for heaven's sake, keep this latest death a secret for a day at least. Within that time, I hope to have your murderer for you.
Then we're going...
We're going, my dear chap, to Silver Schwantz's antique shop in Bond Street.
Those old music boxes are quite charming, Holmes, aren't they?
Yes, but where's Mr. Silberschwanz?
This is probably him. What a fine-looking old fellow.
Oh, Mr. Silberschwanz.
Yes, gentlemen. You are interested in musical boxes?
No, sir, in chairs. Particularly in the handsomely carved chair you delivered to Sir Edward Irvin a few days ago.
Ah, yeah, magnificent specimen. He's pleased with it?
He was found dead in it, Mr. Silverman.
And half an hour ago, someone else was found dead in it also. That chair was one of a pair, wasn't it?
Yeah, but... Holy begotten Himmel. That's impossible. Please to follow me. I will show you it's not possible. Look at the chair.
It's exactly like the same one as Sir Edward's house.
Oh, my friend, but there's such a difference.
15th century Italian, isn't it?
Yeah, this is one of a pair of the famous Malipiero armchairs. There are only 3 pairs in the world, my friend. Of this pair, one, the one I delivered to Sir Edward, is simply a great specimen of the carver's art. This one, its mate, looks exactly like it, does it not?
Exactly. I can't see any difference myself.
You would if you sat in it, old chap.
Precisely. That is why I have these cords stretched from one arm of the chair to the other. If anyone were to sit in it well, sometimes nothing will happen. But sooner or later, a hand will press its hidden spring in the arm here, and death will strike.
But nothing happened when you pressed the spring then, Mr. Silverman?
No, I don't understand.
I do. This is the harmless chair. The lethal one was sent to Sir Edward. He sat in it, accidentally pressed the spring and drove the fatal needle into his brain.
Just as that poor constable did today.
Sir Edward bought both chairs, I presume?
Yeah, I would not sell it, not pair separately.
Then why didn't you deliver both at the same time?
He was afraid of the deadly one. Huh? He asked me to keep it here until he found a safe place for it in his home.
Mm-hmm. And some devil switched the arm cord from the fatal chair to the harmless one so that you delivered death to Sir Edward. There is a subtlety in this crime worthy of the fiendish maker of the chairs himself. Silberschwanz.
Ja, mein Herr.
Didn't Malapieri die of being tricked into seating himself in one of his own chairs?
Yeah, he did.
Ah, poetic justice. I'm much obliged to you, Silberschwanz. Now I think I know how to trap our killer.
Dr. Watson will bring you the rest of his story in just a second, so I'm just going to tell you that after a good dinner, there's nothing quite like a glass of good Petri California port. Petri port is really a wonderful wine. A deep, hearty red in color and rich and truly delicious in flavor. You know, port wine is actually America's favorite wine. Try a glass of Petri port and you'll know why. Petri port is not only fine after dinner, it's perfect whenever good friends get together. Just keep in mind the name Petri, because Petri wines are good wine. Well, Dr. Watson, this is quite a story you're telling us tonight. So you found out how the murders had been committed, but not who'd been responsible for it.
That's quite right, Mr. Bartell. Holmes spent a long time cross-examining Mr. Silverschwanz, the owner of the antique store, as to who might have had the opportunity of switching the telltale cord from the fatal chair.
And who did have that opportunity,
Well,
Doctor?
Mr. Bartell, it transpires that 4 people might have been responsible. Sir Edward's daughter and his secretary, Mr. Binion, had both been in the shop with him at various times. So had the butler, Travers. The 4th suspect was Sir Edward's eccentric brother, Peregrine, who it appeared had dropped into the shop the day after the purchase had been made. With this last information, Holmes became very excited and launched into eager preparations, which ended a few hours later when we found ourselves disguised as furniture removers, driving a van along a quiet country lane near Dorking as we approached the house of Sir Edward's brother, Peregrine.
There's the house, Watson. Ramshackle-looking place, isn't it?
Yes, extremely so.
Why are you so morose, my dear chap? You've hardly spoken a word on our drive down
You
here.
never tell me anything. Why are we trundling off into the wilds of the country disguised as furniture removers and carrying the harmless chair with us?
Surely the reason is transparent, old chap?
Yes, it's just about as transparent as Gough stocking full of hot tripe.
Oh, my dear Watson, surely it's obvious that we're up against an extremely cunning murderer. Now, what advantage accrues to him in using the Malapiero chair?
An alibi, of course. He's nowhere near the place where the murder happened.
Precisely. Apply your logic a little further. 3 of the suspects, the daughter, Mr. Binion, and Travers, the butler, live in the house and would almost certainly have been present at the time of death. Therefore, who gains most by such an alibi?
Well, the brother, Peregrine.
Elementary, my dear Watson. Now you see why we trundled off into the wilds of Dorking.
Well, that must be Peregrine standing up on the porch. He's a funny-looking fellow.
Follow my lead, Watson.
Good afternoon, Governor.
You fellows must have come to the wrong house.
You were Mr. Peregrine Irvine, ain't you, Governor?
Yes?
And we come to the right house. All right. Come on, Bertie, give us a hand.
Right to you or our feet.
What the devil are you unloading an armchair?
Come on, get on there, Charlie. You drop it on my foot, Bertie. Look out. Easy does it. Come on, Bert. That's
I
right.
got it, Alf. I got it.
All right. Let that down easy now on the porch here.
There you
That's
go.
right.
There.
Give me the crickets. Ain't that a pretty chair, Governor? Bertie and me was admiring it on our way down here.
Cool, blimey, in half a nice chair.
But who told you to bring it here?
Orders, Governor. Mr. Silver Snitch, whatever his name is, told us your brother didn't want the chair and said as how we was to bring it to you.
But my brother's dead.
Mr. Silver Snitch said he gave the order before he died. Mind if I sit down in it, Governor?
Oh, of course not,
Cool, lummy. Bit of all right, isn't it?
Look at him laughing.
Who wish me old Trouble and Strife could see me now?
The Trouble and Strife?
Yeah. Trouble and Strife. That's my wife, Governor. Here, sit down yourself, sir. Come on, go on. Sit down, try it. Go on, Governor. Take the weight off your plates of meat.
What barbaric jargon do you speak? What on earth are plates of meat?
Plates of meat is feet, Governor. That's rhyming slang.
That's right. Rhyming slang. Go on, sit down in it. Go on.
Right, very well.
There now. Ain't that comfortable?
Yeah, very.
Go on. Run your hands over the arms, Governor. Ain't that carving pretty? Ain't it just ducky?
Yes, it is. But I don't want the wretched thing. There's been some mistake. So you'd better take it back to London and tell them to sell it. I don't want anything of my brother.
Jumping Jehoshaphat. Can't see why you don't want to sit in a nice chair like this, Governor.
But you're the one that gives the orders around here. Come on, Bertie. Go on, get your back into it.
All right, Alfie.
Let's get back in the van. All right, come on.
Alfie. Away they go.
Oh, bless you, Governor. We don't worry about that sort of thing, do we, Bertie?
Of course not, Alfie. We'd had a nice drive in the country anyhow, didn't we?
That's right. Let's get these old horses going. Good day, Governor.
Good day, Governor. Good. That was a false trail, Holmes. Obviously, he knew nothing about the chair. He thought it was perfectly harmless.
And, as indeed it was. But the murderer would have thought it fatal. I've slipped up in my reasoning somehow. Confound. Oh, but of course. Oh, what a fool I am. We must get back to London as fast as these tired nags can take us. Come on, get up there. Get up.
What's the next move, Holmes?
Back to Sedgwood's house and the staging of a little drama that I'm sure will give us the final answer to this problem.
Yes, Mr. Holmes, I've got Miss Irving, young Binion, and the butler waiting outside. And no one knows we switched the chairs.
Splendid.
You're sure that this is the harmless chair,
Yes,
Holmes?
of course I am. Look here. I sit in it. So, run my hands over the arms. Yes, this chair is harmless, as every person, save one, will know. Show them in, Lestrade.
All at once, Mr. Holmes?
No, I think we'll take Miss Irving and Mr. Binion first.
Oh, right you are, sir. Miss Irving, Mr. Binion, come in, please.
Very well. Oh, Mr. Holmes.
What's the matter, Miss Irving?
It's just so horrible seeing you there in the same chair where I saw Father.
Oh, Mr. Holmes, it's a trifle too macabre for you to assume the position of the corpse. Please get up.
But it seems to be the most comfortable chair in the room, and I do like my comfort when I interrogate witnesses. However, it's hardly chivalrous, is it? Miss Irving, please sit down, won't you?
I don't like to sit down in the chair in which Father died.
Oh, Miss Irving, we couldn't bear to see you standing.
Very well, then.
Don't sit down, Harry.
Why not, Binion? What's the matter? Isn't the chair safe?
No, it's
then
not
perhaps
that,
you care to sit in it. To prove that the chair is safe.
No, I...
Sit down.
Very well. There.
Splendid. Curious chair, isn't it, Mr. Binion? I wonder about these carvings on the arms. They look almost as if they might activate concealed springs. I wonder what would happen if I...
No, for heaven's sakes, Mr. Holmes, you're trying to kill me.
Kill you? Then you know how Sir Edward and the policeman were murdered, eh?
I knew it must have something to do with the chair.
You knew more than that, Robert. You planned it. I remember now that when we went to the shop,
Be quiet, Harry. Come back here, you.
No, Watson, don't go after them. The stride will stop him. In any case, the police are at the door. Oh, I'm tired. I think I'll sit in this rather fateful armchair.
So it was young Binion all the time, eh?
Yes, and he all but outsmarted me. I reasoned that somehow the murderer must have intended the device of this chair to clear him. And suddenly I saw the real motivation. How better establish his innocence than seeming to be obviously guilty, and yet leaving a trail whereby an astute deduction could seem to clear him.
Yes, it's his idea that Mr. Irving came to you. He used you as a cat's paw.
That's right, Watson. I'm afraid this whole case is a rather humiliating experience for me.
Well, why do you say that?
Lestrade had arrested the right man in the first place. Oh, my dear Watson, I shall never hear the end of this. Never.
As usual, Doctor, that was a swell story. Imagine Lestrade accidentally arresting the right man.
Well, he had that one coming to him. Poor fellow, he'd been outwitted by Holmes so many times he was beginning to get an inferiority complex.
What about Miss Irving? How did she take it when her boyfriend Binion had proved guilty?
Well, when she realized that her sweetheart had actually murdered her father, as they say in the penny thrillers, her love turned to hate. But at first, she took it pretty badly.
I can imagine so.
Mr. Bartell, my boy, that's one of the disadvantages of being a detective. When you bring the guilty to justice, you very often cause the innocent to suffer too. Believe me, never become a detective. Stick to being a wine expert.
You calling me a wine expert? Now, wait a minute, Doctor. All I know about wine is that it either tastes good or it doesn't. And I know that wine always does taste good. And I know why, too. It's because the Petri family has been making wine for generations. The art of turning luscious, sun-ripened grapes into fragrant, delicious wine is their heritage. A heritage handed down within the Petri family from father to son, from father to son. What particular type wine you prefer is, of course, a matter of your personal taste. But let me assure you of this. Whatever type wine you desire, for any occasion, you can depend on any wine that bears the Petri label. Petri took time to bring you good wine. And today, that name Petri is the proudest name in the long history of America's wine. Well, Dr. Watson, what new Sherlock Holmes adventure are you planning to tell us next week?
Next week, Mr. Bartell. Now, let me see. Next week, I'm going to tell you a strange story that took place in one of the smaller states of Middle Europe. It concerns a young prince, a most unusual concert, and a beautiful contralto who sang 2 days after we'd seen her die at the hands of the firing squad. I call the story The Haunting of Sherlock Holmes.
Doctor, that's one I've got to listen to.
Yes, Mr. Bartell. And everyone should also listen to what Secretary of Agriculture Anderson says about saving used kitchen fats. We've all got to keep turning in every bit of used fat. Take it to your meat dealer. The shortage of fats is worse now than ever it was. And unless we help, and we all help, we'll all be faced with a serious shortage of soap. Yes, and a serious shortage of paints, lubricating oils, drugs, and many other things that require fats in their manufacture. It's up to us. Keep turning in every bit of used kitchen fat.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and was suggested by an incident in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's story, The Musgrove Ritual. Music is by Dean Faltzman. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studio. This is Harry Bartell saying goodnight for the Petri family. For a solid hour of exciting mystery dramas, listen every Monday on most of these same stations at 8 o'clock to Michael Shayne, followed immediately by Sherlock Holmes. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe.